This is a terrarium inside of a lamp that I set up 2 months ago. I wanted to wait till 6 months to do an update, but this thing needs some serious work. Before that though, we need to go back to the beginning. I found this lamp that I wanted to turn into a terrarium, and the first thing I did was modify the lid to account for lighting. To do that, I unscrewed everything from the bottom, and then cut the screw to be a bit shorter. This made sure that it didn't stick out as much, and the light would be more flush with the lid. After cutting everything, I reassembled it, and attached the light with super glue. This light ended up being one of the biggest issues with the terrarium, as well as the reason I'm redoing parts of it. Once the lid was modified, I combined aqua soil and water to give me a sort of clay-like material. I then used this and some Terrarium stone to create a natural-looking background inside of the terrarium. I added the stones and then added aqua soil in between them to hold them in place. I was unsure how this background technique would turn out since I've never used it before, but I was very happy with the end result. With the background finished, I added a false bottom, mesh, charcoal layer, and substrate. The substrate is an ABG mix. After that, I started to add moss to the background, and this is where the aqua soil comes in handy. It creates a great growing medium for moss. I also added it to the bottom, along with a few more pieces of Terrarium stone. I continued adding moss until everything was covered, and then I started to add a few smaller pieces of Terrarium stone to soften things up a bit. Then I added a few branches of spiderwood to complete the hardscape. Looking back, I definitely could have made a much better scape, but due to lack of materials, this is all I could come up with. Once the hardscape was finished, I added a few small pieces of ivy. After that, I added a few powder blue isopods and springtails. Then I put the lid on, and that completed the build. Fast forward to present day, and the terrarium's doing pretty good. It's got a few patches of dead moss, as well as some mold. However, the springtails are thriving, and we're finally starting to see some new moss growth. Overall, it's doing very well, but it needs a little bit of maintenance, as well as a rescape and some more plants. I'll start by removing the lid. Like I said, this light has been one of the biggest issues with this tank, and I'll talk about that later. Once the lid was off, I started to remove the dead patches of moss. I used 2 types of moss in this terrarium, and for some reason only one type made it. I'm not sure exactly what type of moss they are, but if you recognize them or know why they died, please let me know down in the comments. I also ended up losing the ivy on the left. After removing the dead moss, I took out the spiderwood. Now it's time to add new moss. This is the same kind as the stuff that survived, so hopefully it'll fix that issue. I added it to the places where the dead moss used to be, again making sure to cover all of the aqua soil. I didn't have time to order more moss, and luckily I had just enough to finish it. I also added some towards the bottom. With the new moss in place, I sprayed everything down so it won't dry out. Now it's time to redo the scape with some leftover spiderwood. Even though I had a lack of materials, I still feel like I could have made this scape better in the first version of it. To me, the previous scape felt like I just threw everything in the terrarium, and it didn't look good at all. I also didn't spend too much time on the previous one, so I made sure to spend more time on this one so I had something I was happy with. Instead of just throwing the wood in here, I made sure to give it a direction to flow in. I had about 4 times the wood that I had last time, so it gave me a lot to work with. Already I was starting to tell that the scape was much better than the previous one, and I really liked the direction it was going in. I also made sure to add a larger variety in sizes of the wood. It got fairly hard to scape it because of everything taking up so much room and being so delicate, and it made it hard for the tweezers to get in there. Still, I managed to get everything done, and I'm very happy with the final result. It's an absolutely massive improvement from the last one, but it'll look a lot better with plants. For that, I have a few pieces of ivy and an asparagus fern. I started with the tallest ivy and put it in the back left corner where the old one used to be. I then added the asparagus fern behind the largest branch in the scape. It feels good to have a larger variety of plants, and I definitely think it'll help it look better. I also pulled part of the asparagus fern underneath the largest branch. I then added the second largest piece of ivy towards the back right corner. This is the same one that was there before. As for the 2 smaller pieces, I added one to the front right and one to the front left. I'm not exactly sure what kind of ivies these are, but I've used a bunch of ivy in the past and I've had pretty good results. The plants ended up looking pretty good. The only thing I would have changed is to add a little bit of color. With the planting done, it's time to address the biggest issue with this terrarium. The lighting is very good, however the batteries need replacing every 2 to 3 days, which makes it extremely inefficient. To fix this issue, I need to add something that plugs directly into the wall. I started by removing the old light, then adding the new LED puck light that I had left over from the raining Terrarium. As with the old one, I superglued it in place. Luckily, the cord of the light fit in between the container and the lid perfectly without having to drill any holes. With the lighting fixed, I gave the Terrarium a good spray down and then cleaned the glass with a paper towel. I then screwed back on the lid, and you can see here how the cord fits in between the lid and the container. I put the lamp in place, and that completed the build. The Terrarium inside of a lamp version 2. In my opinion, this is a massive improvement from the first version. Not only does the scape look much better, but the variety of plants adds so much. Again, I would have liked to add a little bit of color with the plants, but I think it looks just as good as is. Also, I'm not quite sure what happened, but all of the isopods disappeared. It is cool, however, to see all of the springtails thriving. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Do you think this Terrarium is an improvement from the first one? Let me know down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!